Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. Today we're delving into a story that hits hard, a narrative of trust shattered and the agonizing uncertainty that follows. The post is titled, "My GF Cheated on Me. Ike What to Do." It's a long one, a raw and honest account of a heart in turmoil, so settle in as we give voice to this user's experience. 3 years. That's the foundation we're talking about. 36 months of building a life, a future, something I genuinely believed was rock solid. She isn't from here. Her roots are in another country, a place that over these past 3 years has woven itself into the fabric of my own life, becoming a second home. We had a rhythm, a comfortable and cherished pattern. She's a teacher, which means she gets those long, glorious summers off, and every year she goes back to her family. Every summer and again around Christmas, she'd make the trip home, and for the last 3 years, I've made it my mission to go with her for a part of that time. I'd book my ticket, pack my bags for 2 or 3 weeks, and immerse myself in her world. It was never a duty, it was a privilege, her family. They welcomed me with open arms from day one. They love me, genuinely love me, treating me not as a guest or a boyfriend, but as a son. The affection is mutual. I adore them and I've come to see them as my own family. And my family, they feel the exact same way about her. They're constantly saying she's the one who finally managed to ground me. It's true. Before she came into my life, I was adrift, moving through my days without a real anchor or direction. She gave me a center, a sense of purpose. She made me want to be a better man. We built a home together, a shared space filled with our plans, our laughter, and the quiet comfort of a life intertwined. It felt perfect. It felt real. But perfection is often a fragile illusion, and mine was about to be obliterated. The first crack in my perfect world appeared just 2 days before I was scheduled to fly out to her home country for the summer. It was late, the house was quiet, and my phone lit up with a text from her. The words were a masterpiece of evasion, a vague and cryptic message that skirted the issue but screamed that something was fundamentally wrong. "I want to talk to you before you come, to give you a chance on to not come if you don't feel up for it," she wrote. A chance to not come. The phrase hung in the digital air between us, heavy with unspoken confessions. My stomach plummeted. In that instant, with a certainty that was as cold and sharp as ice, I knew. Call it gut instinct, call it the painful wisdom of past wounds, but I knew she had cheated on me. The word itself was a venomous whisper in my mind, a poison seeping into the foundations of my world. She didn't have to spell it out. The calculated ambiguity of her text was a confession cloaked in cowardice. I pushed for an explanation, but she deflected, insisting that this wasn't a conversation for text messages. She wanted to talk on the phone, she said. It was the closet thing to in person, a way to give me the courtesy of hearing her voice while still providing me with an escape hatch. She presented it as a kindness, this opportunity to avoid flying across the world only to be trapped. The irony was suffocating. I was already trapped. I was ensnared in the sticky, intricate web of a betrayal that was only just beginning to reveal its ugly pattern. The following day was a torturous exercise in going through the motions. Work was a fog. My body was at my desk, but my mind was thousands of miles away, endlessly replaying her words, dissecting every syllable, searching for a meaning that I already knew. I tried to brace myself, to build some kind of emotional fortress for the impending call, but it was a futile effort. There's no armor that can protect you from a blow like this. When I finally got home, I took a long, shuddering breath, the kind you take before you dive into freezing water, and I dialed her number. The silence that stretched across the line after she answered was heavy with dread. And then the story began to spill out, a chaotic, self-serving narrative of my world's implosion. It started, she explained, with one of her friend's roommates. Flirting. That's the cliché, isn't it? The seemingly harmless banter that dances on the edge of a line until it thoughtlessly trips over it. She had the audacity to claim she couldn't remember if she flirted back. A convenient amnesia, a transparent attempt to dilute her own accountability. But I wasn't born yesterday. Of course, she flirted back. These things don't happen in a vacuum. 2 days later, at a festival, their paths crossed again. A chance encounter, she called it. They just ran into each other. Life certainly has a twisted sense of humor, and that's when it happened. The roommate kissed her and she kissed him back. She was quick to add the qualifier, the desperate little addendum that it didn't go further than that. As if that mattered. As if the depth of the betrayal could be measured in degrees. The line had been crossed. The trust had been vaporized. The foundation was now just rubble. I listened, a silent storm of shock, grief, and rage brewing inside me. But the part that truly sent me over the edge, the part that transformed my sorrow into a white-hot fury, was her next sentence. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice laced with a cloying, pathetic attempt at sincerity. "I'm turning into the person I don't want to be because you don't make me feel wanted." The sheer, unmitigated gall of that statement. To not only betray me, but to then have the audacity to lay the blame at my feet. It was a stunning act of emotional manipulation. A desperate, cowardly attempt to rewrite history with her as the victim and me as the unwitting villain. "You don't make me feel wanted." Those words echoed in the ruins of my mind, a cruel, mocking joke. Everything I did was to show her how much I wanted her. I traveled to a whole other country, year after year, just to be with her. I embraced her family as my own, learned about her culture, and made her life a central part of mine. I had her birthday gift, a carefully chosen and expensive present I was so excited for her to open, waiting for our return home. I had invested every ounce of my being into this relationship, and for her to take all of that and twist it into a weapon against me. It was a deeper betrayal than the kiss itself. In that moment, the physical act became almost secondary. It was the calculated cruelty of her words, the absolute refusal to take responsibility, that sliced me to the bone. My first instinct was to burn the plane ticket. I told her I wasn't sure I wanted to go anymore, that I couldn't just show up and pretend everything was fine. And her reaction, it wasn't remorse. It wasn't understanding. It was anger. She was angry with me. The perpetrator was angry with the victim. The logic was so warped, so twisted, it was almost laughable, but her tactics shifted quickly. When her anger didn't work, she resorted to a more subtle, more insidious form of manipulation. The texts and videos started arriving. Her family preparing for my arrival, her mom asking about my flight, her cousins saying how excited they were to see me. It was a calculated, targeted attack, using my love for her family as leverage, guilting me into sticking to the plan. And it worked. I was torn. The thought of being in her presence, of breathing the same air, felt unbearable. But the thought of disappointing the family I had come to love, of causing a painful scene and severing those ties, was equally agonizing. So, against every screaming instinct, against all better judgment, I packed my bags, went to the airport, and got on the plane. And that's how I ended up here. In her country. In her home. Trapped in the waking nightmare she had orchestrated. The moment our eyes met at the airport, she knew. She could see the resentment etched into my features. She could feel the invisible wall I had constructed between us. I couldn't bring myself to touch her. The thought of a hug, a kiss, was repulsive. We have been here for a few days now, and I've tried. God, I have tried to bury it, to forget, to pretend. We had a moment of privacy the other night, a rare opportunity for connection in a house teeming with family. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe through physical intimacy, we can find our way back. But I couldn't even get her interested in having sex with me. It has been 2 months since we last saw each other. 2 months. And now, sharing a bed, we might as well be on different continents. Her coldness, her disinterest, was a new and alien thing. I haven't tried again. It feels as though she doesn't want me here, as if my very presence is an uncomfortable reminder of her guilt. I shouldn't have come. As if this emotional minefield wasn't enough, her mother has been relentlessly, though lightly, harassing me about marriage. She brings it up at every opportunity, singing my praises to anyone who will listen, painting a picture of our perfect future together. And my girlfriend, the architect of my current misery, just sits there and smiles, seemingly all for it. It's a surreal, out-of-body experience. I'm being celebrated as the ideal future husband, while the woman I'm meant to be building that future with has just detonated a bomb in the middle of our lives. I'm seeing everything through different eyes now. Every word, every glance, is filtered through a new lens of suspicion and pain. The nights are the worst. I'm plagued by dreams of her cheating, vivid, torturous nightmares that leave me waking in a cold sweat, my heart pounding with a fresh wave of betrayal. Tomorrow is another test. I have to face her friends, the very same group she was with when it happened. She swears they don't know, that they would have fought her over it because they all supposedly despise cheaters. It's another convenient narrative, another thread in a story that is unraveling faster than she can spin it. Before I flew here, she floated the idea of a trial separation when we get back home. 2 or 3 weeks apart, she suggested, to see if this is what we really want. We live together. The bed is mine, but I already know I'll be the one to volunteer to sleep somewhere else, to make myself a ghost in my own home. The kiss itself is becoming less of the central issue. It's a symptom of a larger disease. The core of my pain, the thing I can't get past, is that she blamed me for her cheating. We haven't spoken of it since I arrived. I've made a few pointed comments, little jabs to test the waters, and it just makes her angry. Like the other day, she told this story about tripping over her long, flowy pants while carrying food up some steps. She's clumsy, so it's a plausible story. But as she told it, how her pants came down and everyone saw her pantless, I couldn't help but ask if the roommate saw. We were in that house. That was the night the flirting started. My question was met with a flash of pure anger. That's where we stand. I don't know how I feel anymore. Or rather, I feel too many things at once. I don't know if I can ever trust her to go home and hang out with her friends again. My stomach already twists into knots when she's on her phone for too long. She knew my history. She knew I'd been cheated on before, that it's the one thing that truly breaks me. And she did it anyway. That's the story in a nutshell. Sorry for the ramble. The days that followed my arrival settled into a strange and agonizing rhythm. On the surface, we were the perfect couple visiting family. We went to the local markets. I dutifully smiled for photos, and I played with her younger cousins. I was an actor in a play I didn't audition for, and the role was killing me. Her mother's comments about marriage became a form of psychological torture. Each time she mentioned it, patting my arm and calling me her future son, a wave of nausea would wash over me. My girlfriend would just smile, a vacant, serene expression on her face that made my blood run cold. How could she sit there, basking in her mother's approval, knowing the truth of what she had done? It was a level of cognitive dissonance I couldn't comprehend. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a funhouse of deception where nothing was as it seemed. The house, once a place of warmth and welcome, now felt claustrophobic. The walls seemed to be closing in, every cheerful conversation a muffled roar in my ears. I found myself making excuses to be alone, taking long walks through the unfamiliar streets of her hometown trying to clear my head. But the thoughts followed me, relentless and intrusive. I replayed our last 3 years together, searching for signs I had missed. Was I a fool? Was our entire relationship a lie? The self-doubt was a corrosive acid, eating away at my confidence, at my very sense of self. The nights were the worst. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were a relentless highlight reel of my deepest fears. I would see her with him, the faceless roommate, their laughter echoing in my ears. I would wake up gasping for air, my heart hammering against my ribs, the betrayal as fresh and raw as it was in that first phone call. I would look over at her, sleeping peacefully beside me, and a wave of such intense anger and revulsion would wash over me that I would have to get out of bed and go sit in the dark, just to breathe. The distance between us in that shared bed was a vast and unbridgeable chasm. We were two strangers occupying the same space, the silence between us thick with unspoken accusations and unanswered questions. My attempts at affection had ceased completely. The resentment I felt was a physical barrier, making it impossible for me to touch her without feeling like a hypocrite. And she made no move towards me. It was as if she had already accepted this new, cold reality. Or perhaps she was relieved by it. This thought was a new kind of pain. Maybe she didn't want my affection anymore. Maybe the kiss wasn't a mistake but a choice. A sign that she had already checked out of our relationship. The day of the gathering with her friends arrived like a death sentence. I spent the entire day in a state of high anxiety, my stomach in knots. I considered feigning illness, but I knew it would only postpone the inevitable. So I put on a clean shirt, forced a smile onto my face, and prepared for battle. The friends were just as she had described them, loud, friendly, and completely oblivious. Or so it seemed. They welcomed me with hugs and back slaps, asking me about my flight, about my job, about my plans for the summer. I answered their questions on autopilot, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. I watched them interact with my girlfriend, looking for any sign of complicity, any flicker of shared knowledge in their eyes, but there was nothing. They were either completely in the dark, or they were the most convincing actors I had ever met. The conversation inevitably turned to the festival, the scene of the crime. They recounted stories of the music, the food, the general revelry. My girlfriend joined in, laughing and adding details, her voice light and carefree. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. How could she sit there and reminisce about the night she betrayed me? It was a level of callousness that I found staggering. I excused myself to go to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, my reflection in the mirror a stranger's, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hatred. I had to get through this. I had to survive this night. I returned to the table and refilled my glass with wine, the alcohol a welcome anesthetic for my frayed nerves. I listened as they talked, a silent observer in a world that no longer felt real. I felt a profound sense of alienation, of otherness. I was not one of them. I was the outsider, the fool, the cuckold. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. As the night wore on, the alcohol began to work its magic, dulling the sharp edges of my pain. But it also loosened my tongue. I found myself making small, passive-aggressive comments, little barbs disguised as jokes. I would ask my girlfriend questions about the festival, my tone deceptively casual, my eyes locked on hers, searching for a reaction. She would answer with a strained smile, her eyes flicking nervously towards her friends. They didn't seem to notice the undercurrent of tension, their laughter and conversation a loud and boisterous shield against the uncomfortable truth. The night finally ended, and we said our goodbyes. The walk home was a silent, tense affair. The air between us crackled with unspoken words. When we got back to the house, the fragile truce that had existed between us for the past few days shattered. The confrontation was inevitable, a storm that had been brewing since I first stepped off that plane. It was ugly, it was raw, and it was devastatingly necessary. We yelled, we cried, we accused. All the pent-up anger, hurt, and resentment came pouring out, a toxic flood of emotion that threatened to drown us both. I told her everything I had been feeling, the paranoia, the insecurity, the rage. I told her that I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. She listened, her face a mask of misery, the tears streaming down her cheeks. And then, for the first time, she dropped the defensive act. She stopped making excuses. She stopped blaming me. She just broke. She told me how sorry she was, how much she hated herself for what she had done. She told me that she had been feeling lost, insecure, and that the attention from the roommate had been a temporary, pathetic balm for her bruised ego. She told me that it meant nothing, that he meant nothing, and that she had been terrified of losing me ever since. Her confession didn't magically heal the wound she had inflicted, but it was a start. It was the first honest moment we had shared since this nightmare began. The wall of anger and defensiveness had finally crumbled, and in its place there was a raw, vulnerable, and terrifying honesty. We were both exposed, our hearts laid bare, the future of our relationship hanging precariously in the balance. I didn't have any answers. I still didn't know if I could forgive her. But as I looked at her, sobbing and broken in front of me, I knew one thing for sure. I still loved her. And that, I realized, was both a blessing and a curse. The path forward was shrouded in fog, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see a faint glimmer of light, a tiny, fragile spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The aftermath of our explosive argument was a strange and unsettling calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of emotional wreckage. The yelling was replaced by a heavy silence, a quiet so profound it felt like a physical presence in the room. We were exhausted, drained, with nothing left to say. For the remaining days of my trip, we moved around each other like ghosts, navigating the small spaces of her family's home with a careful, deliberate distance. The pretense was gone. Her family, though they never said a word, knew. They could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the cold front that had settled over our relationship. Their cheerful inquiries were replaced by worried glances, their warm smiles tinged with a sadness that mirrored my own. I felt a pang of guilt for bringing this darkness into their home, for tainting their happy family reunion with my personal misery. Her mother stopped talking about weddings. The pressure was off, but the relief was overshadowed by a deep and abiding sadness. The future she had so excitedly planned for us had evaporated overnight, leaving behind a void of uncertainty. I found myself mourning not just the loss of trust, but the loss of that future, the life we were supposed to have. It was a phantom limb, an ache for something that was no longer there. The conversations between my girlfriend and me became less frequent but more meaningful. We talked in hushed tones, our voices raw with unshed tears. We talked about our fears, our insecurities, the cracks in our foundation that had been there long before the cheating. It was a painful process of excavation, of digging through the layers of our relationship to find the source of the rot. I learned things about her, about myself, that I had never known. I learned that her confidence, which I had always admired, was a fragile facade built on a foundation of self-doubt. I learned that my own tendency to avoid conflict, to sweep problems under the rug, had contributed to the distance between us. It was a bitter pill to swallow, this realization that I was not entirely blameless. The cheating was her choice, her responsibility. But the environment in which it occurred was one that we had both created. This understanding didn't excuse her actions, but it did complicate them. It forced me to look at the situation with a new, more nuanced perspective. The black and white world of heroes and villains dissolved into shades of gray. We were both flawed, both human, both capable of causing and receiving pain. The day of my departure arrived, a bittersweet mix of relief and dread. I was desperate to go home, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house, to put some physical distance between myself and the source of my pain. But I was also terrified of what that distance would mean for us. Would it be the final nail in the coffin of our relationship, or would it give us the space we needed to heal? Our goodbye at the airport was a quiet, somber affair. There were no dramatic declarations, no passionate kisses. Just a long, lingering hug, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that now separated us. As I walked towards the gate, I looked back and saw her standing there, a small, solitary figure in the bustling terminal. The look on her face was one of utter desolation, and for a moment my heart ached for her. This was the woman I loved, the woman who had been my home for 3 years. And now she was a stranger to me. The flight home was a blur of conflicting emotions. I felt a sense of liberation, of release from the emotional pressure cooker of the past few weeks. But I also felt a profound sense of loss, a hollow emptiness that seemed to expand with every mile that separated us. I was flying away from the problem, but I was also flying away from the only person I wanted to solve it with. When I landed, the familiar surroundings of my own city felt alien, foreign. The home we had shared felt empty, haunted by the ghost of our former happiness. I walked through the rooms, touching the objects we had chosen together, the photographs of our smiling faces, a cruel mockery of our current reality. The birthday gift I had bought for her sat on the table, a brightly wrapped symbol of a future that might never come. The first few days of our trial separation were a strange and disorienting experience. We communicated via text, our messages short, polite, and devoid of any real emotion. We were like two business associates negotiating the terms of a contract, not two people who had once promised to spend the rest of their lives together. I threw myself into my work, seeking refuge in the familiar routines of my job. But the thoughts of her, of us, were a constant, nagging presence in the back of my mind. I started seeing a therapist, a neutral third party to whom I could pour out all the anger, hurt, and confusion that I had been bottling up inside. It was one of the best decisions I have ever made. He helped me to process my emotions, to understand the complex dynamics of our relationship, and to see the situation with a clarity that I had been unable to achieve on my own. He didn't give me any easy answers. He didn't tell me whether I should stay or go, but he did give me the tools I needed to make that decision for myself. He helped me to reconnect with my own sense of self-worth, to realize that I was not defined by this betrayal, that I was worthy of love and respect. The separation was a period of intense self-reflection for both of us. We were forced to confront our own demons, to take a long, hard look at who we were and what we wanted from our lives. It was a painful, lonely process, but it was also a necessary one. We had to break apart before we could even think about coming back together. The future was still a terrifyingly blank page. I didn't know what the next chapter of my life would look like, but for the first time since that fateful text message, I felt a sense of agency, of control. I was no longer a victim of circumstance, a passive participant in my own tragedy. I was the author of my own story, and I was ready to start writing again. The decision of whether or not she would be a part of that story was still up in the air. But I knew that whatever happened, I would be okay. The storm had not broken me. It had, in fact, made me stronger, and I was ready to face the future, whatever it may hold, with a newfound sense of courage and a quiet, resilient hope. The weeks of separation stretched into a month, a period of quiet introspection that was both agonizing and clarifying. The initial, raw anger began to subside, replaced by a deep, melancholic ache. I missed her. I missed the easy intimacy, the shared laughter, the simple comfort of her presence. The silence in our apartment was a constant reminder of her absence, a hollow echo in the spaces we had once filled with life. We began to talk on the phone, our conversations tentative at first, like two people learning a new language. We tiptoed around the central issue, focusing on a neutral territory, work, friends, the weather. But slowly, carefully, we started to venture into more difficult terrain. We talked about the therapy sessions, sharing the insights we had gained, the painful truths we had unearthed about ourselves and our relationship. There were no easy epiphanies, no magical moments of absolution. It was a slow, painstaking process of rebuilding, brick by brick, a foundation that had been reduced to rubble. I had to confront my own complicity, the ways in which my fear of conflict had created an environment where resentment could fester. She had to confront the deep-seated insecurity that had led her to seek validation outside of our relationship. It was a humbling and often painful experience for both of us. There were days when I was convinced that we were finished, that the chasm between us was too wide to bridge. The image of her with someone else would flash in my mind, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me, and I would want to hang up the phone, to cut her out of my life for good. But then I would remember the good times, the 3 years of love and laughter that had come before the storm. I would remember the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had grounded me, who had made me a better man. And I would force myself to stay on the line, to keep talking, to keep fighting. The turning point came during a late-night phone call, about 6 weeks into our separation. We were both exhausted, our emotional defenses worn down by weeks of therapy and introspection. And for the first time, we talked about the kiss. Not the logistics of it, not the who, what, where, or when, but the why. She told me about the feelings of loneliness and invisibility that had been plaguing her for months, feelings that I, in my own self-absorption, had failed to notice. She talked about the intoxicating and ultimately empty allure of a stranger's attention. She didn't offer these as excuses, but as explanations. She took full responsibility for her actions, her voice thick with a remorse that was so palpable, so genuine, that it reached across the thousands of miles that separated us and touched my heart. And in that moment something shifted inside of me. The anger, the resentment, the consuming need for retribution. It all just softened. It didn't disappear, but it lost its sharp, cutting edge. In its place, a fragile, tentative shoot of forgiveness began to emerge. I realized that I had a choice. I could hold on to my anger, I could let it consume me, I could let it define the rest of my life. Or I could choose to let it go. I could choose to forgive. Forgiveness, I was beginning to understand, was not about condoning her actions. It was not about forgetting the pain she had caused. It was about releasing myself from the prison of my own bitterness. It was about choosing love over hate, hope over despair. It was a gift, not to her, but to myself. We decided that it was time for her to come home. The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. We had made progress over the phone, but we both knew that the real test would be in person. The day she arrived, I was a nervous wreck. I stood at the airport in the same spot where she had picked me up just a few months earlier, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw her, walking towards me, her face a mixture of hope and trepidation. And in that moment, all the anger, all the hurt, all the weeks of agonizing uncertainty just melted away. And all that was left was love. It wasn't the same naive, untested love we had before. It was a different kind of love, a more mature, more resilient love. A love that had been to hell and back. A love that was scarred but not broken. We still have a long way to go. The trust is not yet fully restored. The scars are still there, a permanent reminder of the pain we have endured. But we are working on it together. We are committed to rebuilding our relationship, to creating a new foundation built on honesty, communication, and a deep, abiding love. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I am hopeful. I have learned that love is not a fairy tale. It's a choice. It's a commitment. It's a daily act of forgiveness. And it's a battle worth fighting. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you. What moment in your life made you see someone for who they truly were? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers, where the real stories get told.